Hey, welcome to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Today we're going to unpack that fertilizer ratio. Those three numbers that you see on the fertilizer package. What does it mean? Let's find out. When you go to the store and you buy some fertilizer, what's the three numbers that you always see on the fertilizer package? Well, it's a ratio and it stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are called macronutrients. And let's talk about those. What are they? What do they do? Here I have several kinds of fertilizers that I sometimes use, and well, they've all got this little number on them. They've got this ratio. This one's 20, 10, 20. This one here is 463. This one here, Blossom Boosters, is 10, 30, 20. What do these numbers mean, and how do you use them? Blood meal 1200, Dr. Earth 522. Well, these numbers are telling you the ratio of the macronutrient by weight that's in the fertilizer. So let's say you've got a 552 here. 5% of this bag by weight is nitrogen. 5% of this bag by weight is phosphorus, and 2% of this bag by weight is potassium. Everything else in here is either filler or some other kind of nutrient. Dr. Earth has a whole lot of other good stuff in here. It's got all kinds of good biological stuff to add to your soil. So nitrogen, let's talk about first nitrogen. What is it? Why does it matter to your plants? Nitrogen is the macronutrient that promotes green growth. It helps with chlorophyll. The chlorophyll, of course, is the green cell, the green stuff in the plant that does photosynthesis. So nitrogen is very important. It helps with leafy growth. And if you got some sickly looking plants that are kind of yellow and they're not doing too well, nitrogen is often what you want to help that plant. So yeah, nitrogen is great for growing things like greens, greening up any new plants that have just come up. Nitrogen is very important. All right, the second number on a fertilizer ratio represents phosphorus. Phosphorus is a macronutrient that promotes good root growth. You want real strong roots in your plants. Phosphorus is what your plant needs. It also promotes blossoms and fruiting. Hence, the Blossom Booster fertilizer has a high middle ratio number. Phosphorus is very important for your plants. It's usually found in most all-around fertilizers in some amount or another. But if you really want to boost that root growth, you want to get something that has a higher phosphorus ratio. So here's another idea. If you make your own fertilizer mixes, bone meal. Bone meal is a great source for phosphorus, and if you flip it over and look on the back, we find that the bone meal here has a 4-12-0 fertilizer macronutrient ratio. That means 4% nitrogen, 12% phosphorus, and it doesn't have any potassium in it. So bone meal is a good source for that. Bone meal also is sometimes rather slow release, and that's good. You want that stuff to stick around in your soil and not wash out. All right, the last number in our ratio is potassium, 10, 30, 20. This has 20% potassium by weight. Potassium, you can think of it as a nutrient, as a vitamin. It really helps the vigor of your plant. It helps with the microscopic transfer of nutrition inside your plant. It's vital. Think of it as like an energy drink for plants. It's good for the overall health of the plant. It aids in disease resistance, and it's just one of those things that a plant has to have. Potassium is also called potash or potash, depending on how you pronounce it, where you come from. And it used to be derived from wood ashes. And yeah, well, there's a lot of sources of potassium these days, but just know that potassium is a necessary, vigorous boost to your plant. So those all three together are the macronutrients in our fertilizer. Now, fertilizer is derived from a number of places. You can get synthetic fertilizers like this stuff here. You can get organic fertilizers like this stuff here. What are the benefits and pros and cons of those? When you see these ratio numbers on your fertilizer, it's often tempting to think, well, plants need fertilizer, more is better. And, get a higher number ratio like 30, 20, 30 or something like that, or, 20, 20, 20. And, well, that's not always the case. Plants do better with a lesser dose, a less concentrated dose more frequently. And that's because they're only going to take up as much nutrition as they need. And if you put a heavy dose of fertilizer on there and you put a lot of fertilizer on there frequently, you can burn the roots, you can damage your plants. So I prefer to go with a lower ratio. Something like Alaska fish fertilizer is 5:1:1. The stuff I put on my tomatoes, what was that, 1:2:1? I like to do that frequently, like every 2 to 3 weeks, rather than, you know, just saturating my soil with this high dose of chemicals or you know, macronutrients that the plants don't need. You can really put your garden out of balance doing it that way. So look for lower ratios. That's my suggestion, and apply them more frequently. Another thing to look for when you're shopping for fertilizer is micronutrients. You want to look for all those other kinds of micronutrients plants need. You know, magnesium, for example, sulfur. There are all kinds of micronutrients that a good, well-rounded fertilizer will have. And also look for mycorrhizal fungi and good beneficial bacteria. Your good fertilizers will inoculate your soil. Man, that's a hard word for me to say. Inoculate your soil with all that good stuff you need. If you've got a brand new garden, that's especially important. If you've brought in garden soil mixture from your local dirt yard, it's probably not got a lot of biological life in it. So you'll want to get a good, well-rounded fertilizer. I like Dr. Earth slow release because it's got all that good stuff in it. So it's not just the macronutrients we're looking for, but also those micronutrients. Synthetic fertilizers are usually water-soluble rather quickly, and if they come in solid form, they're usually held together in a binder, and that binder can leave in large amounts. If you put large amounts of that in your garden, can build up what they call salts, and it's not like salt, but it is chemically a salt. And that stuff can build up in your soil, and it's not good for your soil. But used in moderation, synthetic stuff is just fine. Your plants don't care whether a nitrogen molecule comes from a synthetic or an organic source. The downside of synthetic fertilizers is, since they're so quickly water soluble, they usually leach out of the soil really quick. So the boost is they're available right away to your plants. The downside is they often wash out really quickly. An organic fertilizer is usually more slow release. It's made of organic matter. It's made of things that are derived from nature and not produced in a factory. And by very nature of the organic stuff, it breaks down slowly and remains in the soil. So it's not available usually to your plants right away in a real quick, like if you just need a boost, it's oftentimes not available right away. The soil life has to work on that organic fertilizer, break it down, and it's actually that soil life breaking down your organic slow release fertilizer that produces the things your plants need, the nutrients. Some exceptions to that are like fish emulsion and organic liquid fertilizers. Those can be available to your plant right away. So yeah, it doesn't really matter if you don't have to call yourself a failed gardener if you have to resort to something like Miracle-Gro just to give your plants a boost if they really need it. Sometimes that's what you need. Now, fertilizing your garden is not always necessary if you have good, healthy soil and you make your own compost. Compost itself provides the nutrition that your plants need if you've got a well-rounded compost. Compost has low doses of all the major macronutrients and all that biological goodness that the bacteria and fungal life bring to your garden. What I like to do is put a layer of compost on my garden, maybe a ½ inch to an inch, just right on top. It's called sheet mulching or just sheet composting. I put that on there, and generally that feeds my garden the health of my soil for the whole season. And I do that twice a year if I can. If I don't have enough compost, well, it gets me through the year. But I also spot fertilize with liquid fertilizers, and sometimes I'll put some slow release fertilizer in the hole where I plant my transplants. That just ensures that those plants, especially when they're getting started and they're young, they're getting that phosphorus for their roots to develop, and it just ensures that there's a lot of good nutrition down there where the plant is. The compost is the overall health of the soil, and I like to use these fertilizers where I need a little bit of a boost. When I grew my tomato plants, and what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to fertilize every 3 weeks with a liquid, all-around well-balanced fertilizer. I'll be using Neptune's Harvest tomato formula. It's just a good all-around fertilizer. I did that last year. My plants thrived. They were lush, dark green, beautiful. So fertilizer, it's a great tool to have in your garden, but don't fret it if you have to get if all you can get hold of is something like Miracle-Gro. You know, it's just nutrition. It's just macronutrients. The plant doesn't care that it came from a factory. It's still nitrogen. It's still potassium. It's the same stuff. Just don't use that stuff forever. Don't use it in high volumes and for long periods of time. It will leave behind things in your soil that are not healthy for the soil. These plants look like they need a little bit of water. We'll take that opportunity to give them a little drink. I've got a little bit of rainwater here, and I've got some Neptune's Harvest tomato and veg. This is a 212. Of course, the sun has taken the label off, but it's still good stuff. This one's not even been opened yet. This is a fish emulsion type fertilizer, and I just eyeball a little bit in there. I see that it's mixing around a bit. This is a liquid fertilizer and will be available to the plants really quick. Some of these liquid fertilizers are also able to be taken up through the leaves. That's called a foliar feed. That little pepper plant over there, it's looking a little pale. I don't know what's the deal there, but we'll just go ahead and give these a little boost. I did not fertilize these since putting them in, so now's a good time. Spring garden's coming along. Got some beans to plant over here, and I've got some cucumbers to plant right here, so we will sow those directly. Yeah, looking good. So there's a little bit about NPK. I hope it was useful and helpful. Thanks for joining us on Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Please subscribe to our channel if you like our content. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. And this wind. Good heavens.